Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, good evening. Welcome to Community Homeworks class this evening. It's Power Tools 2 time with Lee Taylor and all of our power tools. He'll be demonstrating how to use them tonight, but please, if you have questions, type them in and we'll be glad to take the time to answer them. Like to remind you that we do always appreciate your donations. You can mail those in, or there's a website that scrolls across the bottom of the screen. If you watch this at a later date and have a question, please send us an email to that address and we will get back to you with an answer as quickly as we can. Again, thank you for coming tonight. Please ask those questions. And Lee is going to tell us about power tools.
All right, thanks, Dean. We got a lot to cover. So I said in the first class, we were talking a lot about safety. So we're just going to get into it. If you haven't watched that Power Tools 1, you may want to take a touch on that and go over some of the safety things that we were talking about. I'm going to start out tonight with compound miter saw. A lot of people call it a chop saw. This is a 10-inch. It's referring to the blade size. That's important because it talks about how much it can cut. This particular one is just your standard compound miter. And when I talk about compound, what I'm talking about is that it can tilt to make cuts, make bevel cuts like that. And then miter is where it can make cuts. This one is up to 40, 42 degrees or so. Some of them are a little bit, can make a little bit more of a cut, of an angle. Like I said, basics with this. As far as what you usually people will use this for is going to be trim. So something like around a door or whatever. So I'll show you with this. So this is our scrap piece of trim. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half. Got my safety glasses on. Talked about that. Real quick on this, these lines right here. Basically, these lines, you don't want to see your hands or your fingers closer to the blade than those lines. It's kind of your guide. You want to keep whatever it is you're cutting butted up against. This is the fence. This is the table. And right now we're doing a 90-degree cut. It's going to be a little loud. Apologize. So you can see when I cut that, I didn't go real super fast. You know, if you're going to be going fast, if you go fast, if you have a cut and it's really burred up and everything, it usually meant you went too fast. Remember, I left you guys with saying Power Tools will talk to you. Here's one of the things. And it might be hard to hear. I'm used to doing this live, but you can hear the difference in that cut. So, and also see all the burrs and everything else. It's not really that fine of a cut anymore. And also, too, how that blade sounded as it was going through. So this is our straight cut, our 90-degree cut. If we're going to do a miter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it whatever way that miter is going. So, you know, when I do trim, I always have the fat part of the trim sitting up against the fence. I'm going to back this up, if you can see that or not. I'm going to make a 45-degree cut like this. So what I'm going to do is first, you can see how I'm holding it. I don't have my hand near the trigger. Obviously, I want to see people with an open hand checking as far as where that blade is, whether they need to adjust their wood. And okay, I'm looking at that, and that looks good. I'm going to open it up, or I'm sorry, I'm going to have it up. The guard is going to be closed all the way down. This one has a safety trigger here.
You can't hear a word you're saying when it's going.
So I squeeze it, I bring it down, I cut, I bring that, I clear the blade. So whatever it is I'm cutting, when that blade's coming up, I make sure the blade is clear of whatever it is I'm cutting before I take my hand off the trigger. And I stop. I wait for that blade to stop. So there's my first 45-degree cut. Like that one, see how it's burned a little bit? I went a little slow, or the blade could be a little dull. So that's the one side. And now I'm going to rotate this to the other side. And I can cheat with this one. I can bring, this is a blade's going to be in this area here, so I know that it's going to cut right around in there. So I'm going to keep my hands out of the way, keep control of this. Usually I have one thumb pushing it up against the fence and a finger or two holding it down. I'm going to check it real quick. Yep. Waiting for that electronic brake to kick in, get my piece, get it out of the way. And now, so let's say let's say I'm doing a door or whatever, right? And I want to put this up. There's my one side. There's my other side. And you know, if for some reason the opening is not necessarily a true 45, you can adjust, you can play with those adjustments, and then you would go ahead and shoot that on. So, like I said, that's usually what most people think of when they're thinking, of a compound miter saw. There it is right there too. So that's nice. And like I said, you can always play with the angles a little bit if the opening that you're working with is a little out of square or whatever. You have a bunch of different settings. You have 31.5 or 31.6, 30, 22.5, 15. Some of them have stop sets where there's something actually set in. It depends on the brand. Some of them have more, some have less. If you have an odd cut, let's say I want to do 16 degrees for whatever reason. So there's my 15, there's my 16. I'm going to move this over. I'm going to line that red line right up to the 16. And this one has a turn where I'm going to tighten that up and it's not going to move, and then I'll be able to make my cut. It's the same on either side. The thing with some of this limitation, I guess, is the distance from your table to the guard. And I'll bring that one up because I already said it's a compound miter. So sometimes you want to do a bevel cut. And at that point you would loosen this up. It's kind of the same deal. You would say, I want to do a 15-degree bevel cut, right? And then you would put your piece in, you tighten this up, put your piece in, and do a 15-degree bevel cut with whatever it is that you're cutting. So I put my piece in there.
Trying to cover the mic up when you do that.
Oh yeah, it's probably that's loud. So that gives you that angle cut. You can see that. Now there's another way to do that. These bevel cuts can be a little bit difficult to get accurate, and they can be a little dangerous. So I'm going to show you another way to do a 15-degree bevel cut without having to use the compound side of it. So I'm going to say 15 degrees. Get it back to that 15. This one doesn't have a stop on that 15, so I'm going to tighten that up. I'm going to get the other side now. I'm going to stand this up. Now you can see this is just clearing that guard. If you had anything that was wider than this, you wouldn't be able to do this. Sometimes if it's a larger blade, like a 12-inch blade or something, your depth of cut, or however you want to think about it, is going to be higher. So sometimes that's what you have to think about as far as what it is that you're going to be doing with that saw. I'm going to go like this and say, okay, I don't want to waste wood. All right. So everything clears. The other thing to watch when you're standing something tall like this is sometimes this guard, depending on how it is, wants to catch on it. And that can be dangerous. I've seen people try to reach in there and move the guard. Please don't do that. So I always do a dry run. The guard's clear. Start. stop.
I can't hear you if you're talking.
And I wait for that blade to stop before I reach in. And then I have the same thing. So you can see that side, that's the miter, or sorry, the bevel. And then this is
Hold it.
like that.
Yeah, it's easier to see.
So you can do the same thing in different ways. So, like you said, chop saws, compound miter saws are real handy. There's a lot of things you can do. Sometimes you get into a situation where you have something really wide to cut. I pick this. So again, 10-inch blade really is only going to be able to cut a certain depth. So here's the issue. So when I go to cut this, my blade's going to stop somewhere right in that range. So let's see. Right? I can't cut all the way through. Now, this is where you do not want to tip this up while you're working. You may see some people do that. It's not a good idea. If I hit that situation, I'm just going to spin it around. And I'm going to, keep my hand off the guard. I'm going to line up that blade right in where that cut was. And most of the time, you're going to have a decent cut. So like I said, there's always ways to get around and be able to do that. But like I said, a little larger blade is going to cut a little bit deeper, a little bit further away from your fence. There are ones out there that are called compound miter slides. Those are really nice. They are a little more expensive, but if you're going to be cutting wide, deep material, what it would be is you'd set it on there, and this whole unit, you'd have rails, and as you went down, you could pull it out and push it in, and you can cut boards. I've seen it where you can cut boards that are 16 inches wide or something. They all have a little differences in them. But so compound miter slide for something a little bit wider, or circular saw, which is what we're going to be talking about here in a minute. So, like I said, lots of different ways to do it. Lots of different little accessories. Sometimes people get something like this that slides in, and it makes it so that I can hold a piece of trim. So it frees up a hand, so this holds it up against the fence. There are pieces like this. This is the built-in stop. So let's say I'm doing a repeat cut where I have, I do this, I unplug it. This is a stop where I can put a piece of wood in, put it right to here, and I know that it's going to be a certain distance, and I can put this on either side. So if I'm doing multiple cuts of, 12 inches or whatever, I can set up a stop where I'm not having to measure it out each time. It just kind of helps speed that process up. Lots of, nice little tricks and tips that you can do with the compound miter saws. It's handy to have. The more you use it, the more you realize what it can be used for. A lot of people think, hey, chop saw cuts for wood, right? Well, you can cut PVC too. Let's say, so you're doing a plumbing project and you PVC, all the same rules apply. And nice clean cut on my PVC pipe. That's not me. So you can cut PVC. You can cut thin metal. Thin metal is what I'm saying. You can cut vinyl. You can cut a lot of different things with it. So, like I said, just don't think that it's only good for wood. I will bring up about the teeth real quick, and then I'm going to have to shift to the next tool. Oh, this one doesn't. So if you look at these teeth, this is called a 40 tooth. Basically, the easy way to think of it is the more teeth there are, the finer the cut is going to be. So trim and stuff like that. You may have a 60 tooth blade or even an 80 tooth blade. The more teeth, the finer the cut. The less teeth, the rougher the cut. Like for rough lumber or whatever, rough framing, that sort of thing. So that's kind of how to determine your blades. Like I said, this tool gets talked about in a lot of other different classes also. And remember, if you guys have questions, you know, put them in the comments down there, and we'll be touching back on this in other classes for sure. Now, sometimes you have something that is relatively big. So let's say like a piece of OSB. So let's say you have this whole sheet right here. You know, say you have a 4x8 sheet or something along that line. And you want to be able to cut that. So let's say you had a big sheet. I couldn't find a big sheet, so I cheated. I just got this one. So, you know, if you put it up on sawhorses or something along that line, and it's very difficult to cut by yourself, but you got to control it and whatnot. So what I do with this, I'll throw it on the ground. I put a piece of 2x4 underneath it or 2x6 or something to lift it. I'm going to adjust my blade depth, and that's with this guy right here. This is a circular saw. So I'm going to adjust my depth of how deep that's going to cut. I'm going to get it to what I want. If I'm not sure, I take a measurement from the point to the fence tape right here. I'm going to make my mark. I'll use it long ways like this. I'll make my mark of how I want to do it. And then what I'll do, I'll actually stand on it like this. And we'll get into more on this in a minute. I'm just showing a nice little trick. So let's say I have my line going across. I'll hold it right here. I'm going to hold it off. Start it up. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Hopefully the battery doesn't die like it just did. But yeah, you can run along like that and be able to do quite a long cut as you're going along. This blade's a little dull. It doesn't help. You can be able to do that without trying to hold on to it and everything else. I will say that about saw blades. It's the thing about saw blades is if they are dull, they have a tendency to want to kick and bind and stuff like that. So the duller the blade, the more dangerous the blade is. So I'll say that. So you know, you don't want to be using a dull blade. If you have, I'll click on this guy right now. If you have things that you want to cut, I'll cut this guy right here. If you have things that you want to cut using a circular saw, so you don't have a chop saw or something, you can use that circular saw. Again, you can adjust your depth on your blade. In this case here, I'm going to adjust my depth a little bit deeper. I'm going to loosen this up and kind of knock this down just a little bit. Close that up. This is your lower guard, your upper guard. Handle to hold on to it. Like I said, this is a cordless, but you know, corded is about the same way. Let's say I'm going to have my mark. I'm going to show you something real quick. So anytime you're going to be using a circular saw, you want to have your mark. Usually these marks here are going to line up with the blade, and they're all a little different, and you'll get used to it after using it for a minute. Biggest thing I'd say is what you want to avoid is what's called kickback. What that means is that that blade binds, or dull blade, and it wants to push back this way at you. So when I'm doing this, I'm going to make sure that I'm kind of off to the side. I'm going to have my mark. I'm going to, a lot of times I'll look right here where that blade is actually touching that mark. I back that blade off so when it starts, it's not, you don't want to be touching the wood and start the tool. So I Go like that. Start it up. Push all the way through. That does my cut. Does it give you as nice and clean as of a cut as a chop saw? No. Sometimes that doesn't matter. I wouldn't use something like this for trim. But like I said, cutting sheet goods, cutting wider material than you could on your chop saw is a good idea.
Wait, hang on a second. You went. Okay, there we go. Try again, just in case.
Sometimes you need to do what's called a plunge cut. And what I mean by a plunge cut is you may need to cut out a square out of your floor. So let's say this is your floor, and we talk about this in flooring class. So what I do is I say I need to know how deep I need to cut. So I can cheat here and say, all right, this is set right about right. It's just going to cut through. So that's good. And let's say this is my damaged area, but the rest of the sheet's in good shape. I make sure there's no staples or anything else like that. I'm going to hold this guard. I'm going to fold it up like this. See, I don't like this one. You have to come over on this side, and I can show you why I don't like this particular one. For me, you can hold that guard up, but it's hard for me to reach over to grab this part. So these are little ergonomic details that, you know, if you can play around with it is nice, but I'll make it work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this up. And I'm actually
You can't talk while you're doing it.
yeah, I can, you know, cut into it like that and then cut up to where my mark is and then kind of do the same thing. Get in there and clean it up, be able to pull that out, and be able to put the new piece back in. So like I said, circular saws really have their place. Sorry, I'm watching the clock, so I got 4 other things I got to talk about. They have their place. They're really nice. As far as them talking, so I said that they do talk. They will tell you when they're not happy. I'll tell you what that sounds like. So if I'm cutting something and I'm either getting resistance, this thing is pushing back on me. It could be that I'm trying to twist that blade. It could be just that the blade is dull. It could be both. And you will hear a difference. I'm not sure if you can hear a difference on this, but we'll find out. So if I'm cutting through, hear that noise? It's binding, so, and I can feel it trying to push back on me. But a lot of times, if you're listening to what it is that's going on, you can actually hear if something's not going right with that tool. And I said, as you're using them, you're going to learn some of these sounds that they should be making and shouldn't be making. If for some reason, safety-wise, if you're cutting something, you're going to have your hand here. Ideally, if you're going to have somebody help holding this, you're going to screw it down. And you're cutting something, and it starts to buck on you or wants to come back on you, take your hand off the trigger. Keep your hands on the handle and the grab right here until that blade stops, and then pull it out. It's a big mistake to take your hands off it because it'll just come chunk and flying out at you. And that's not good. So, like I said, circular saws, real good. Hey, they have their place. And they're actually pretty handy as far as being able to cut a multitude of different things. Set this guy down. All right, a couple more things. We may come back on some of these things here. I just want to make sure I get through some of these. So this is the drill driver. I was talking about this in the last class. I was saying that this is probably going to be your most useful tool. So again, we called it drill driver because you can drive screws or whatever. So in this case here, I have it set up where I have, these are called T torques. They have a funny look to them. I don't know if you can see that or not, but they're designated T. Stands for torques. And the higher the number, the bigger it is. So you can see this is a T25 and this is probably a T6 or something. Really small, but you can see we have 3 different sizes here. Lots of different sizes, but why do I personally like the torques better? Because they're going to grab and they're less likely to strip. They're less likely to cause problems, I guess is the best way to put it. So if I am running one in, you're going to see you have 2 different settings. You have, this is speed 1 and 2. Sometimes I'll break it down. This one, 2 is a higher speed. You can see how fast it's going. That's reverse. That's forward. That's for drilling. So drilling holes, that sort of thing. Anytime you're driving something, you want a lower speed. So I'm going to lower that speed down. And it's going to make it so it's less likely to strip. With this one, I got this is a T25. I'm going to run this in like this. Now you can see what I'm doing. I'll turn it this way. You want the drill to be in line with the screw. And what I mean is you don't want it cocked like this or like that, right? You want it right in line. That's first thing. Second thing is you want to use that variable speed trigger. So what I mean by variable speed is I can barely squeeze this and make this run slow or faster the harder I squeeze that trigger. What people have a tendency to do is just reef down on that trigger and it chatters. You know what we'll do? I can't make it strip out. Those T's are good. They don't want to jump out. But I'm going to start out. Oh, the clutch is on. We'll talk about the clutch in a sec. Start out slow until it's starting to bite. Keeping it in line like that. And then I can just pulse it at the end to kind of get it where I want to as far as depth goes. I said that's a nice way to be able to do that. I got a forward and reverse. So that's this little button right here. So forward, if you're looking at it, reverse, I'm sorry, if you're looking at it as counterclockwise, it's going to be running that way. It's going to pull those screws out. Forward is clockwise, obviously. So if I want to get that screw out, same rules apply. In line, keep pressure on it. So I'm either pushing this way with this hand, or sometimes I have a hand up here. And I can back that screw right out and be able to push that screw off to the side. They are going to be hot, so watch out when they come out. If for some reason I'm running a screw in and I don't want to over drill it or over drive it. So let's say I'm attaching these 2 pieces of wood, whatever, doesn't really matter. Let's say this is real soft wood. So what I'm going to do is I'm on the slower speed, which I am. This has a clutch. And what that clutch does is it makes it so that this is going to stop turning once it gets a certain amount of resistance. Some have numbers, some have, this is mid torque. Some have, less torque. It just depends. But it basically what it is, it's just going to stop that screw from advancing. So if you have that, this is good for like drywall or something along that line. So if you have that, okay, you can see how I'm kind of holding that screw until it starts to bite. I'm holding it on that smooth part of the shank there and just kind of keeping it in line, a little pressure on it. Just starts to bite. All right. Now what I can do, and I set this torque really low to see how that it gets a certain amount of resistance and stops turning. Well, obviously you want a little more than that. So I'm going to turn this up a little bit more and see where we're at. Yeah, a little more. Still need more. I'll run that like that. So you can see in that case, it's still just a hair up. So I'm going to give it a couple more clicks.
Can you lift that up a little more?
Well, screw down to the can. Yeah, see that? That's what's over driving. I put it up too much. Now it's pushed all the way through, so I can back it up. So, what is this good for? Why would you even need that? Let's say you're putting up drywall. Let's say this is drywall. And you don't want to, when you're running those screws in, ideally you don't want to break the paper on the drywall. So you just want them just sunk in just enough. You can find that setting on that torque setting and be able to run that in, and it will make it so generally it's going to stop before it drives all the way through. Another thing is, let's say you're putting in screws and you don't want to over tighten the screws, because if you over tighten them, they're going to spin. And what happens is it has a tendency to strip those screws out. So you can set the torque setting for, hinges or something along that line, where you just don't want to over tighten them. A lot of times that's how screws get stripped out, is if they get over tightened. They just have a tendency to strip out. They strip the wood out, not the head. So like I said, clutch setting on that makes it so that you can do some of that finer work. If you are drilling, this one has a little drill setting. So here's a little picture of a drill. And with that, I'm going to speed this thing up. So what this is clutch also. So I'm going to get a drill bit. Here's my drill bit. I'm going to put that in. As you spin this way, it's going to, make it smaller or larger. Put that in like that. A lot of times you can just reef it by hand. Sometimes it'll click. I'm on a higher speed. Now I can drill whatever it is that I want to drill. And like I said, it's a higher speed. You can flip your bits around as far as being able to change out drill bit sizes, stuff like that. So another nice part is, you can get a bit set that has a lot of different sizes, torques, all that sort of stuff. You can get these magnetic holders that are these guys, where it will hold these smaller bits, where if you strip one of these out, it's not a big deal. You can go down and get a new one. You're not having to buy a whole new set. Versus these are more for actually engaging into the drill itself. So in this case, let's say I have an issue where I have a head like this. So I have a nut driver, little magnetic nut driver, right? And I can put this into the truck. Pull that up a little bit. There it goes. Close that in. Close that down. And then I'm going to be able to put that in. Get ones that have magnets in them. They're really nice. It frees up a hand. So this is a Tapcon. This is what you're going to be going into concrete. So let's say we have, let's say we want to attach something to the concrete floor. That's where a Tapcon like this would come into play. First, you would have to drill your hole. So that brings me to the next thing. So the way these Tapcons works is that, certain size Tapcons are going to require a certain size drill bit called a Masonry bit. to be able to drill a hole into the concrete. Now, some of these drill drivers have what's called hammer feature.
Yeah.
See that little hammer there?
What's kind of hard to do?
Yeah. There's a little picture of a hammer, and sometimes they say hammer drill. That's what they're talking about. So what it is that there's a special bit that goes in there. You don't want to use your wood bits. They're called masonry bits. And you go ahead and put that bit in. And as you're driving it in, I don't have one. I don't really want to drill a hole in your floor. As you're driving it in, it's kind of hammering in a sense. It's probably the best way to say it. And it's going to be able to make it so it drills through or drills that pilot hole for that concrete. But that's what the hammer drill is. So if you're having to drill something, let's say a handrail or something like that, into some concrete somewhere, you're going to want a hammer drill. And then a lot of times the cordless have combination hammer drill and whatnot. Usually that's going to up the price a little bit, but again, depending on what it is you're getting into. So that's the hammer feature on those drills. The big thing with this is, like I said, we'll come back over here, is how it feels. And one of the things is, and I've said this before, is how does it feel in your hand? This one's a little big. How heavy is it? You know, I would say, you know, if you're kind of up in the air as far as how heavy it is, hold it above your head like this for about, a minute. If your arm starts getting tired before that, it's too heavy. There are other styles of drills out there. This is just a little heavier drill. It's a little more balanced. I don't have the battery. It's over there. But it's a little more balanced out. It's not wanting to tip down like this. It's still a heavy duty. Like I said, there's a lot of different styles out there. So a lot of it is, like I said, playing around with it to be able to see what it is that you like. Pick on this guy here. So the other tool I did a quick talk about, well, I'll pick on this guy actually. So here's another drill driver. This is a small one. You know, it's got the clutch on it. Doesn't have a hammer drill, but again, if you don't need that, there's nothing wrong with that. It's got a variable speed trigger. Got a little light. That's a little 12 volt. Nice and light, small. You can get in small areas. This is fine. You know, you can put your whatever bits in there. I'm going to show you a difference on one of these things. I'm going to move on you again. Is the chuck size. So this one, so I want you to see the difference. This is a 3/8. It's a 1/2 inch. If you have a choice, get the larger size. It's gonna open up a lot more things that you can actually put into the chuck of the tool itself. That's something to look at. If you end up with one that's really small, it does limit you on what you can use as far as what you can put in there. So, like I said, a lot of different things with that. You know, as far as the tool goes, if it's stripping, a lot of times it's going to make a really bad noise. So I'll pick on Phillips here. See if I can get it stripped. That. Now it's doing that because I'm not in line. I don't know if you can see that in the direction I'm at. Come on this side. Yeah, I'm just not in line. And you're getting that noise. That's just that tool talking to you saying, I'm stripping the screw out or I'm stripping the bit out. So that. And you can look at the tip of this is starting to strip out a little bit, or the screw's stripping a little bit out. Yeah, you can't see it on there, but that's the thing is, if you hear that chattering, you feel it bouncing around a little bit, stop, straighten it out, adjust your how you're holding it, how you're putting pressure on it, that sort of thing. And again, with these tools, the more you use them, the more comfortable you get with them. So it's a lot of different ways to be able to use this. Talk about Sawzall.
Yeah.
So Sawzall is another one of those tools that is really nice. Like I said, this one, to be able to take the blade out, this one has a lever like this, and I can pull that blade out. I can change the style of blade. So this one, sometimes we'll call them a metal blade or a bimetal blade. Real fine teeth. This is meant for cutting metal. So, let's say for some reason I wanted to cut these pipes. That's what kind of blade I could use to be able to cut these out and get this stuff cut out. They have rougher teeth blades that are meant for cutting wood. Why is that important? With all these other tools, pretty much they're all straight cut tools. So you when you want to cut something, you're cutting in a pretty straight line. Sometimes you have to be able to cut around something. So if that's the case, Sawzall is one of those tools. Jigsaw is also another one that I can be able to make cuts like that. So I can put that blade in, give it a tug to make sure that blade's engaged. And, squeeze it like this. Again, variable speed, because the harder I squeeze it, the faster it's going to be able to go. I can, like I said, I can cut quite a bit. This is pretty versatile. A lot of people use it for more like demolition and stuff like that. But, if you have a circle, let's say I have to cut a circle, right? I can use my drill driver and drill a hole that's big enough for this blade to get in. So I can drill a hole or a couple holes to be able to make it so the blade can get in. And then I can insert that blade. As long as my battery don't die. Battery's wanting to die on me already. But I can make angle or circular cuts, and I said a lot of different lengths. Usually a shorter one is a little bit easier to deal with. But yeah, I can get in there and be able to make a circle cut around something. Or if I'm, hanging board and I need to make, let's say a cut like that, will it look that nice? Probably not, but I can get in with a tool like this and be able to get in there and cut that out. Another nice thing is that this tool is bendable. The blades a lot of times are bendable. So let's say for some reason I'm taking a wall out or something along that line. I won't be able to cut this screw, but I'll be able to show you what I'm talking about. So let's say there's a wall that's attached, so let's say in your basement, right? And there's a wall that's attached to the concrete floor. I can bend that tool like this, that blade, and get it underneath that base plate. And be able to cut whatever it is holding that down and be able to get in there and just, run it along and be able to free up whatever it is that I'm trying to cut out. You can use this. They have pruning blades. Those are real aggressive teeth on those blades. Like I said, all different lengths, but let's say I'm digging a hole and I got a giant root that I need to cut out because that's where I need to plant my whatever it is or put my post in for my fence and stuff. I can change that blade out and get down into that hole and cut that root out. So like I said, Sawzall is one of those things that, the more you use it, the more you find out what you can actually use it for. It is, it's pretty nice. as far as the safety side of things, or what it has a tendency to do, there's no guards on it necessarily. There's what's called a boot. Ideally, when you're cutting something, you want to place that boot up against what it is that you're cutting, all right? And then cut down into it. Right. Once it's biting into that material, you can back it off and then be able to finish your cutout. One of the things that people have a tendency to do is if they're cutting something, whether it's wood or metal, it doesn't really matter. They have a tendency to stay in one spot. They don't move the tool. And there's nothing wrong with that other than it chews up your teeth right in one area. So what I have a tendency to do is if I'm cutting something like this and it starts to bite, I'm going to actually move that tool a little bit. So and it just makes it so that you're using more of the teeth and you don't necessarily chew up your teeth right in that corner or right in that one spot. It just kind of like lengthens the life of your blade, whatever blade it is that you're using. The other issue with these is that they can have a tendency to buck. I've seen people get hurt with them pretty bad. So let's say for some reason we're cutting something up high, right? Whether it's a pipe or whatever. And I've seen it where people go like this. Can you see where I'm at? And they're doing this because they want to line up. The problem is sometimes this thing will grab. And I've seen people get jacked right in the face, in the nose or whatever, because this thing bucks sometimes. So, on that note, if you're cutting something, obviously your safety glasses on, fine, you can line up like this if you need to line up with whatever it is, but back off a little bit when you go to cut it. I'm not going to cut this. When you go to cut it, because if for some reason it wants to do this, at least your face is clear. And you're not going to look like some hockey player with a busted tooth, unless you really like that. But, yeah, so, like I said, Sawzalls, they're nice. Like I said, and all these tools are, they're useful. Like I said, they all kind of have their place. A lot of them can be somewhat interchangeable. Like I said, I can use like a hole saw set for my drill driver, and basically that's where I have different size hole saws. So you can get a hole saw that's 8 inches all the way down to something small for making holes like in a door or something like that, or a hole like that where that pipe is going through. That's probably like that's like a 6-inch hole. So I can put a hole saw on these to be able to drill out things like that, to be able to run pipes through or whatever it is that I need. Couple other little things now that we do have a couple more minutes that I'll get into. We were talking about, I'll go back to the chop saw. So I want to make sure I got through some of this. We were talking about the distance from your deck to the guard. So depending on the chop saw itself, some people like to get these for cutting like a 4x4 post. Let's say, again, you're putting a fence in and you want to cut some of these posts for whatever reason. Sometimes it does not cut all the way through, if that makes sense. I don't have a 4x4 to show you, but imagine you put a 4x4, it's 3.5 inches by 3.5 or so inches. And I've seen it where, let's say it's laying out this way, and I've seen it where you go to cut through and it just doesn't cut through. Well, why? Sometimes I've seen it where the motor housing right here is actually kind of bulged down like this, and it actually hits the motor housing before it actually cuts through. So it's details like that sometimes that you have to kind of look at, and you can always kind of read up on that and ask, oh, there's a hole saw. So here's a hole saw right here. This is a size that I can't read because
it's a 1 inch.
1 inch. All right. So yeah, that's something like that. I can put that in there. If I got a second, I'll show you this. But yeah, so I mean, there are a couple things that chop saws sometimes can't do. And you want to kind of ask those questions, or if you can even try it, that sort of thing. The other is, I want to talk about the safety, another little safety feature on this. I don't have it plugged in right now. I've seen people where, let's say they're left-handed, or they're even right-handed. I've seen people where they're holding it like this, and then they run their hand like this. I call it cross-handing. Don't do that. Because again, you can see, like I said, it can cut you like that. So I said, you're generally keeping this whole area clear of anything. If you are, so with me, I'm right-handed. So a lot of times my waist or my cutoff is going to be to the right of that saw. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to kind of, in a sense, do it backwards. Sometimes I have to have my waist off to this side. Well, all the same rules apply. I'm just using my left hand to actually run that part. And that can be a little bit awkward, I guess, is probably the better word. So yeah, sometimes, you have to be a little creative, but it's just never cross your arms, your hands. And sometimes that means flipping the board around, it may mean flipping this around this way and actually using this. Can you do that? I don't like to see that because, again, this arm has a tendency to drift this way. And as easily as this will cut through wood, it will cut through your arm, your wrist, your finger.
Bones.
Bones, all that stuff. So, yeah, like I said, please don't do that. And the other is that, when this thing is in, you have a miter cut, or something along that line, people have a tendency to forget that blade is now pushing over this way. And I've seen it where somebody has a miter cut like this and they don't think about how that is, and they put their hand, their thumb is inside this area, and it nicks off the tip of their thumb or cuts their thumb right off. So again, sometimes how this is beveled, kind of dictates how you're going to hold it. I always say, have your fingers far enough away from that blade where you're not going to get hit. The other thing is this, and I've done this myself. You don't want to cut something that's shorter than from this line to where the cut is going to be. Why is that? Let's say, I'm not saying to do this, but let's say you had a little piece like this, right? And you have to just take a blade width off. Problem is what's going to happen is that blade's running this way. So it's putting pressure on this board. And it's wanting to push this way. I've seen it where when it's cutting and it's really small, it wants to push against that, and then it comes flying back at you. And that little piece of wood all of a sudden becomes this projectile and is hitting you in the face or hitting you in the chest and knocking the wind out of you, that sort of thing. It's just not fun. So like I said, generally, if you're cutting something, make sure it's relatively long to be able to cut that. Like I said, could keep going and going and going, but like you said, as you're watching other classes, we'll be talking about some of these tools. May even be able to get into a mode of being able to show how to be able to use that tool to be able to do that specific task that we're talking about. And again, nice thing about this video is you can go back and watch it. Tell me if I made any mistakes. Other than that, anybody got any questions? No? All right.
Thanks for coming tonight. I hope you learned lots. Again, if you have questions, you can email them to us. We love to hear from you. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Remember, go back and watch it whenever you're going to get those tools out so that you're safe. We never want anyone to get hurt doing a home improvement project. Again, thanks for coming. See you next week.